Hey guys, it's Mike from Big Ocean Dive, KL's #1 PADI 5-star dive center. So today's subject is currents. And currents can be a kind of taboo word for divers. It can stress a lot of divers out. But I'm here to tell you that if you learn how to manage currents, you learn how to read currents, that currents can be kind of fun. And you can see really cool things during currents. So currents are great. And without currents, there'd be no diving. Okay, so we're gonna cover the causes of currents, the different types of currents, how to predict what kind of current you're gonna get under there. We're gonna find out ways to determine if there's a current at the dive site or not. Also how to be safe in a current, and if there's any equipment to help us in a current. All right, so what are the causes of currents? Well, there's a few main causes, about 4. The main causes are wind. Wind can also affect the waves and the choppiness on the surface. Tides affect current. The difference in the tide chart, if there's a larger gap in a shorter amount of time, that means water needs to travel a big difference quickly and you're gonna get a big current. If you have very small change over a long period of time, it's gonna be a nice slow transition. Earth's rotation, obviously, we have the world spinning, we got water moving, that can make a difference too. Also changes in the density of water, salinity, and the temperature. That has to do a lot also with the deep water currents, how the system flows. That can make a difference. All right, so there's 3 types of currents. There's very deep water currents, then there's mid-water currents, and then we have something called surface currents. Now, surface currents can be a little bit deceiving because you're gonna think, oh, it's just at the surface, a few meters below the surface is surface currents. But actually, 400 meters deep and up to the surface is considered a surface current. All right, so let's say we're going on a dive and you don't know that there's current. Here's a few ways to find out if there is current. So before you leave on the dive, you can find something that's biodegradable that will float. Obviously like a old coconut or some driftwood or something that is not gonna cause harm to the ocean. You can obviously put it in and watch it float. And that's a pretty easy way to tell the direction of the current. Another thing is if you're at a dive site and a boat is hooked up to a line, as you're approaching, look at the direction that the boat is going. The boat will always end up facing the current because it's pulling it along. So if you see 3 boats there and they're all facing one direction, you know the direction's going the current's going that way. But if they're all just kind of floating around and moving around and not all in the same direction, that means there's probably not much current. So that's how you tell on the surface. And how you tell underwater is easily if you get in the water. Now remember, there could be strong current if you're not ready for it. So it's best to hold on to the line at the back of a boat, or once the boat is hooked up, swim to the front of the boat and hold on and stick your head underwater with a mask and snorkel. You can look for a few things. You can look for anemone and soft coral. Obviously, you'll be able to tell. If they're all whipped one direction and not moving, the current is ripping. If they're kind of just freely moving about, then you know that you have not much current. But if you can see them going back and forth and back and forth, you kind of have a surge. And a surge is usually in shallow water because it is affected with the waves coming up. Maybe it's splashing up against a reef or a rock, and that'll affect that kind of surge. Another thing is you can look at fish. All right, fish live in currents. These guys are masters at currents. They know how to be in currents. And if fish are freely swimming around and everyone's doing their own thing, then there's not much current. But if all the fish are facing the same direction and it seems like they're just kind of wiggling and staying in the same spot, that means they're facing the current. So you know that when you get in, current's coming head on from where the fish are pointing. All right. Also, if they're really working hard and they're barely moving, then you know it's going to be quite strong. But if they're just kind of slowly kicking back, then you know there is a current. But it's not going to be terrible. All right, now let's think about this. Our hand signal for current, this is current, and then we'll point to the direction that the current is coming from. So remember, this is the current hand signal. So now let's talk about, we've established that there's a current, we've established the direction of the current, and hopefully we get an idea of how quickly the current is moving. And before we jump into that, I want to give you a little tip. If you're night diving, it's hard to read those things sometimes. So if you see a patch of sand that you can safely get to that is within your depth, you can kneel down on that sand, pick up some sand, and just let go, and you'll be able to easily tell which way the current's traveling. So when you dive, a current is actually quite nice because you can do something called a drift dive. And essentially, you go down, you set your neutral buoyancy, and you float along for a free ride. And when you're floating around, you want to always face the current, just like how fish are. That's the way you control it. If you got the current behind your back, you have no control. You want to face it head on, and you don't want to kick the whole time. Don't forget, you're in a drift. You are gonna be moving. So you can kick to slow yourself down a bit, or if you want to hover over something you see, but kick a few times and then just wait, let yourself float on, kick a few times, let yourself wait, and float on. Do not fight it the whole time. You're gonna burn through your air and you're gonna get way too tired. And remember that you're defeating the purpose of drift dive. The whole point is to let the current take you along. So with those kind of dives, they're gonna drop you off, the boat's gonna follow your bubbles to the surface. At the end of the dive, you're gonna surface. Okay? Now, before we talk about when we get to the surface, underwater, if the boat is not gonna follow you, that means you're gonna have to come back to where the boat dropped you off. If that is the case, then you always start your dive into the current when you have the most air and the most energy. You're gonna swim into the current, and when you've hit your agreed time or your agreed air limit to head back, now you're just in a comfortable drift, you come back to your spot, and you're good to go. All right, when we go up in a current, if there's a line connected to the boat, always use that line, because you're gonna need to do a safety stop, and that's gonna be drifting you away. It's going to send you past the boat. So use that line, slowly go up, pull yourself up, and remember to always deflate as you go up and to check your dive comm to make sure you're not exceeding your limit. All right? That also goes for the case when you are descending on a dive, because when you're going down, you want to all meet at the same spot. And if you're not using a line, that's going to be tough. And if someone takes longer than expected and you don't have something to hold on to, that is going to be a lot of work for you to keep kicking and staying in that spot. Also, if you know you have equalization issues, make sure that you hold the line too, so that you can focus on equalizing at an agreed depth instead of focusing on staying in the right spot. So with the current, what's always very, very, very important, and this should be on every dive, but particularly on a current, is make sure that you have a dive sausage, a surface marker, a DSMB, because one, you need the boat to know where you're coming up from, but two, when you're on the surface, if the boat doesn't see you and you don't have a line to hold on to, that current can rip you out far away. And you need to make sure the captain always has an idea of where you are so he can pick you up when he's dealt with the other divers. Okay? That is very, very important. Okay? So yeah, current is your friend. Without current, there would be no fish, there would be no corals, there would be no ocean, there would be no life. Okay? And on top of that, current brings out interesting things. Animals hunt in the current. It lifts up all the sediment, it lifts up all the food the small fish eat. The bigger fish eat those fish. The bigger fish eat those medium fish. And now we get the sharks, we get the manta rays, we get all kinds of things. This stimulates life. This is what brings out good dives. So current is your friend. Remember, this is the signal for current. Remember to look at fish. They're always pointing the direction of the current. look at sea anemone or soft corals to find out which direction the current is going and how strong it is. At the surface, look for something floating to tell the direction. Look at where the boats are pointed. All right, and drift. And always stay with your buddy. Don't get lost. Always keep, within a meter or two of your buddy at all times. Remember, in a current, don't fight the current. The whole point, it's a drift dive. Drift with the current. If it's too much or you're going too quick, give it a couple kicks, slow it down, and then it takes a while for the momentum of the current to start moving you again. Let yourself drift, slow the momentum, and repeat. And you can have a very beautiful, nice dive, sometimes even a longer dive because you're not kicking so much. All right, so current is something that can stress you out, but remember what you've learned in this video. Remember that current can be fun and it can bring out really interesting dives, and that you just need to be kind of smart about it and think clearly and you'll be fine. Okay, so that wraps up this video. I hope you got some value from it. I hope this helps you on your next dive with current. And if you did get any value, or if you have further questions, give us a question in the comments. We'll answer that. Consider subscribing, consider liking, and we hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Hey guys, if you got value out of this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving us a comment. We'll be happy to hear from you and answer your questions. Please also follow us on social media. We're on all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, anything that floats your boat. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you.